In today's video, you'll hear the story of how a seemingly harmless online meme transformed into a global nightmare, trapping thousands in an impossible labyrinth. What happens when the lines between your dreams and reality completely disappear, and the only way out is to never wake up? The story begins when the flickering blue light of Alex's laptop screen illuminated his face, casting a pale, almost sickly glow across his features as he scrolled through the latest viral sensation. It was called the maze meme, a seemingly innocuous image of a convoluted, impossible labyrinth, often accompanied by cryptic captions like, "Find the way out." Alex, a self-proclaimed connoisseur of internet oddities, found it mildly amusing. Another fleeting digital distraction in the endless scroll of online content. He'd seen countless such trends come and go, each fading into obscurity as quickly as it arose. This one felt no different. He yawned, stretching his arms above his head, the late hour pressing down on him. The air in his small dorm room was thick with the scent of instant coffee and old textbooks, a familiar aroma that usually brought a sense of comforting routine. He closed the laptop, the screen going black, its reflection briefly showing his tired face. Sleep, a mundane necessity, was calling, promising a temporary escape from the demands of his studies and the incessant hum of the digital world. He pulled the covers up to his chin, the soft fabric of familiar comfort, and drifted into the unconscious, unaware that the innocuous image he had just dismissed had already begun to weave itself into the fragile tapestry of his subconscious. His dream began subtly, a faint sense of disorientation. He was in a maze, but unlike any he had ever seen. The walls were impossibly high, made of a dark, smooth, featureless stone that seemed to absorb all light, casting long, oppressive shadows that writhed with an unseen menace. The air was cold, damp, carrying a faint, cloying scent of wet earth, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like old blood. There was no sky, only a perpetual twilight that hung heavy overhead, pressing down, suffocating. He moved, driven by an instinctive urge to escape, his footsteps echoing too loudly in the profound silence. There were no sounds of life, no birds, no wind, only the scuff of his shoes and the frantic thudding of his own heart. He tried to call out, to make a sound, but his voice was trapped, a silent scream in the suffocating emptiness. The corridors twisted and turned with a logic that defied geometry, leading him deeper into the impossible structure. Each turn revealed another identical, featureless passage, an endless repetition that slowly, insidiously, began to erode his sense of direction, his sanity. This wasn't just a dream. It felt real, terrifyingly tangible, a living prison of stone and shadow. The dream recurred, night after night, each time more vivid, more real. The labyrinth shifted, its layout subtly altered, but the oppressive atmosphere, the bone-chilling cold, and the profound silence remained constant. He started to recognize patterns, minute details, a faint scratch mark on a particular stone, a tiny fissure in the floor. But these familiarities brought no comfort, only a deeper sense of dread, as if the maze was learning him, adapting to his presence. He began to feel an unseen presence in the maze, a chilling certainty that he was not alone. It was not a physical form, but a pervasive coldness that seeped into his bones, a weight on his soul that suggested a predatory gaze from the twisting corridors. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart hammering, the metallic scent of old blood clinging to his pillow. The feeling of disorientation would linger, blurring the line between the nightmare and his waking reality. The mundane details of his dorm room, usually so comforting, now seemed fragile, almost translucent, as if the dream was bleeding through, threatening to consume his waking world. He would check his phone, scroll through news feeds, desperate for something to anchor him to sanity, to prove this was just a dream, a byproduct of stress. One morning he saw it, a post on his favorite internet mystery forum titled, "The Maze Dream? Anyone else?" He clicked, his fingers trembling. The thread was exploding. Hundreds, then thousands of comments poured in, each describing the exact same dream. The impossibly high stone walls, the suffocating silence, the metallic scent, the sense of an unseen presence. It wasn't just him. It was global. People from different countries, different time zones, different walks of life, all describing the same shared nightmare. A chilling sense of dread washed over him, far colder than the phantom chill of his dreams. This wasn't a hallucination. This was a phenomenon, a collective consciousness, somehow connected by that seemingly harmless meme, now trapped in a viral prison of the mind. He scrolled frantically, reading desperate pleas for help, theories ranging from mass hysteria to psychological warfare. The comments amplified his fear, confirming his worst suspicions. This was real. It was spreading, and he was caught in its terrifying web. The screen's glow seemed to intensify, pulsing with the combined anxiety of thousands of strangers. His best friend, Sam, a pragmatic computer science student, initially laughed it off. Mass hysteria, Alex. People see something online. Their brains fill in the blanks. But as the news reports began to surface, vague mentions of a global sleep disturbance, Sam's amusement turned to concern. He saw the dark circles under Alex's eyes, the way he flinched at sudden sounds, the increasing pallor of his skin. Sam tried to offer logical solutions, suggesting sleep hygiene, meditation, anything to break the cycle. He even delved into network security, trying to trace the meme's origin, desperate to find a digital route to this growing nightmare. But the maze was an anomaly, a phantom virus that infected the mind, not the machine. The more Sam tried to find a rational explanation, the more the cold, creeping dread solidified within Alex. The boundaries between their waking lives and the dream labyrinth were eroding, becoming porous, threatening to collapse entirely. Alex felt a profound sense of urgency, a desperate need to find a way out before the maze consumed them all. The fear became a constant companion, a heavy cloak draped over his waking hours. Simple tasks became arduous. The quiet of his dorm room, usually a comfort, now felt like a prelude to the labyrinth's suffocating silence. He started to see the subtle distortions, the glitches, even when awake. A shadow in the corner of his eye that was too dark, too still. A faint, metallic tang in the air of his common room. A momentary warping of a familiar corridor in his university building. Its walls seeming to stretch endlessly, mimicking the maze. These weren't just psychological effects. They were tangible manifestations, bleeding from the dream into reality. He knew he needed help, someone who understood the psyche, the human mind. He remembered Dr. Anya Sharma, a brilliant, if eccentric, researcher in sleep and dreams from a guest lecture he'd attended. She specialized in anomalous neurological patterns, in the fringes of consciousness. She was his only hope. He clung to that thought, a desperate anchor in the rising tide of fear. He felt the unseen presence from the dream, not just in his sleep, but now subtly infiltrating his waking life, a silent observer in the corners of his vision, its coldness a constant reminder of its proximity. His attempts to reach Dr. Sharma were initially met with polite dismissals. She believed in empirical data, in measurable phenomena, not in collective nightmares born of internet memes. But Alex was persistent, detailing the growing number of online accounts, the consistent sensory details, the escalating fear. He spoke of the bleeding of the maze into reality, the chilling distortions he now perceived. He felt a profound sense of isolation, speaking of an impossible truth to someone unwilling to believe. He knew she wouldn't truly understand until she experienced it herself. His only other solace was the Archivist, a pseudonymous user on the Mystery Forum, who meticulously compiled every scrap of information, every fragmented dream report, every obscure reference to labyrinths and shared consciousness. The Archivist spoke of patterns, of ancient symbols, of warnings hidden in plain sight. He hinted at a key, a way to navigate the maze, but his messages were cryptic, veiled in a language of riddles and ancient lore. Alex clung to these threads, these desperate clues, even as the walls of his waking world seemed to thin, allowing the cold, damp air of the labyrinth to seep through. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that time was running out. And then, one morning, Alex awoke, not in his dorm room, but to the cold, smooth touch of dark stone walls, a familiar metallic scent, and the profound, suffocating silence of the labyrinth, perfectly real, perfectly inescapable. The cold, smooth touch of dark stone walls against Alex's cheek was undeniable, shocking him awake with a jolt of pure terror. His eyes snapped open, expecting to see the familiar ceiling of his dorm room, but instead, he was met by the oppressive, featureless expanse of the labyrinth. The air was thick with the familiar cloying scent of wet earth, and that sharp, metallic tang, a smell that had haunted his dreams for weeks. The profound, suffocating silence pressed in on him, broken only by the frantic thudding of his own heart, a desperate drum against the crushing reality. This was no dream. This was tangible, agonizingly real. The walls around him were impossibly high, vanishing into a perpetual twilight that hung heavy overhead, a sky that offered no hope of escape. Panic clawed at his throat, a desperate, primal scream that refused to materialize. He scrambled to his feet, his limbs heavy, his mind racing, trying to comprehend the impossible. How had he gotten here? Was Sam here? Were the thousands of others from the forum here too? The terrifying truth settled upon him. The nightmare had finally consumed his waking world. He began to move, driven by an instinct for survival, his footsteps echoing too loudly in the chilling quiet. Each turn revealed another identical featureless passage, an endless repetition that slowly, insidiously, began to erode his sense of direction, his sanity. He tried to retrace his steps, to find a pattern, a logical sequence, but the maze defied all sense, twisting and turning with a malevolent will of its own. The stone under his bare feet was rough, cold, and damp, the texture so real it grounded him in this terrifying new reality, while simultaneously emphasizing the complete absence of his familiar surroundings. He ran his hand along the wall, the smooth, cold surface sending shivers down his spine. He pressed his ear against it, listening for any sound beyond his own ragged breathing, any hint of another living soul, but there was only the profound, echoing silence, a void that seemed to suck all sound into its depths. He remembered the online forum, the thousands of others reporting the same dream. Were they all trapped here too, lost in their own corners of this impossible prison? The thought brought a terrifying sense of scale to his predicament, making his isolation feel even more profound. As he ventured deeper, the omnipresent cold intensified, seeping into his bones, a profound chill that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. It was the cold of absence, of an emptiness that felt sentient. He began to discern subtle movements at the periphery of his vision, shadows that shifted when he blinked, faint blurs that suggested something unseen moving just beyond the reach of his direct gaze. It wasn't a physical form, but a pervasive presence, a weight on his soul that suggested a predatory observation. He could feel its gaze burning into his back, even when he turned quickly, finding nothing. It was the entity of the maze, the one that had haunted his dreams, now a silent, persistent observer in his horrifying reality. The metallic scent of blood grew stronger, mingling now with a faint, sickeningly sweet aroma, like old, decaying flowers, a phantom smell that spoke of lingering death and grotesque beauty. He tried to dismiss these sensations as products of his own unraveling mind, but they were too vivid, too insistent, blurring the line between hallucination and a terrifying, tangible truth. He was not alone. A flicker of hope, desperate and fragile, ignited within him as he remembered the Archivist, the anonymous forum user who spoke of patterns and a key. He frantically searched his pockets, finding his phone, miraculously still with battery life, though without signal. He quickly accessed the cached forum pages, scrolling through the Archivist's cryptic posts. They spoke of fractal pathways, of resonance points, of a melody that unlocks. It was abstract, maddeningly vague, but it was all he had. He focused on a recurring symbol. The Archivist had posted a spiral, reminiscent of the maze itself, but with a single unbroken line leading to its center. He looked at the smooth, dark walls around him, then back at the image on his phone, searching for any visual correlation, any hidden inscription. The silence of the labyrinth pressed in on him, amplifying the frantic thoughts in his head, each idea a desperate attempt to find a foothold in this impossible reality. He felt the cold touch the back of his neck, a profound chill that was not merely atmospheric, but a tangible, invasive presence, confirming that the entity was now directly behind him, observing his frantic search for clues. He felt the sudden crushing despair that came with the realization of his complete isolation. Sam wasn't here. Chloe wasn't here. They were in the waking world, unaware of his terrifying predicament, or perhaps soon to join him. The thought of them, innocent and oblivious, spurred him onward. He couldn't give up. He had to find a way out, not just for himself, but for the countless others who might follow. He began to experiment, tapping on walls, dragging his hand along the rough stone, searching for any hidden mechanism, any secret passage. His fingers became raw, scraped against the unforgiving surface, but he felt nothing but solid stone. The metallic scent grew unbearable, making his stomach churn with nausea, and the profound cold now radiated from the very walls, a constant, oppressive presence that seemed to drain the warmth from his body. He was trapped in a living coffin, its walls breathing, its air heavy with the residue of countless lost souls who had walked these same impossible corridors. The whispers started again, not in his mind, but echoing faintly from the maze walls themselves, a low, guttural murmur, barely discernible, yet undeniably present. The whispers intensified, becoming a chaotic chorus of overlapping voices, distorted and barely coherent, lost forever, no way out. A child's voice whimpered. He watches, always. The center is cold. An older, raspy voice warned. These were the voices of the maze's past victims, their despair echoing through the stone, desperate to communicate, to warn him. They were the collective consciousness that had been drawn into this digital prison, their last moments forever trapped. He understood now. The entity was feeding on their despair, on the fear of the trapped, on the very act of seeking an escape. The maze wasn't just a structure. It was a living, consuming entity, its walls built of shattered hopes and lost sanity. He pressed himself against a cold, damp wall, trying to block out the maddening cacophony, but the voices resonated in his very bones, a horrifying symphony of torment. He could feel the entity's presence closing in, its form still unseen, but its coldness a crushing weight, its gaze a burning pressure. He was a piece of meat in its game, and it savored his terror. He forced himself to move, ignoring the whispers, focusing on the Archivist's cryptic clues about resonance points. He tapped the walls again, this time with a specific rhythm, a series of quick, sharp knocks, then a pause, then another two. He listened intently, his breath held. For a moment, nothing. Then a faint, almost imperceptible vibration rippled through the wall under his hand. A response, a low hum that echoed the click he'd heard in his apartment. He repeated the sequence, faster now, a desperate Morse code into the heart of the labyrinth. The hum intensified, growing louder, vibrating not just the wall, but the very ground beneath his feet. The cold intensified, so profound it burned, and the metallic scent was overpowering, making him gag. The shadows around him deepened, coalescing into swirling forms that hinted at grotesque shapes. A silent audience gathering in the gloom. He knew he had found something, a hidden pathway, a secret frequency within the maze. But the act of finding it seemed to awaken something darker, something more immense. A narrow fissure, barely visible against the dark stone, began to appear on the wall where he had tapped. It widened slowly, accompanied by a soft, grating sound, like ancient gears grinding into motion. A thin, cold mist, smelling of damp earth and decay, seeped from the crack, curling around his feet. The hum intensified, becoming a low, resonant groan, as if the maze itself were stirring from a deep slumber. The voices, previously a cacophony, now coalesced into a single, collective whisper, clearer, more defined. He knows. You are here. The heart awaits. It was a warning, a desperate plea for him to turn back, but it was also a grim invitation. The fissure widened further, revealing a passage, darker and narrower than the main corridors, sloping downward into an abyss of absolute blackness. It was a path that promised answers, but also an unimaginable terror. He took a hesitant step towards it, drawn by an irresistible compulsion to understand, to break free. He knew this was the fractal pathway, the resonance point the Archivist had spoken of, a shortcut to the maze's center, to its dark heart. And as he peered into the profound darkness of the newly opened passage, a faint, rhythmic melody, like a warped lullaby played on distant, broken music boxes, began to drift up from its depths, resonating with a chilling familiarity. The faint, rhythmic melody, like a warped lullaby played on distant, broken music boxes, drifted up from the profound darkness of the newly opened passage, resonating with a chilling familiarity. It was the sound of his own childhood, a tune his mother used to hum, twisted into something grotesque and malevolent. Alex hesitated at the precipice, a battle raging within him, the primal scream of self-preservation urging him to retreat, and an overwhelming morbid compulsion to follow the unsettling sound, to find the source of its terrifying familiarity. The air within the passage was even colder, thick with the metallic tang of blood and the cloying sweetness of decay, a suffocating embrace that promised an end to all hope. He took a hesitant step, then another, drawn by the invisible current of the melody, his flashlight beam swallowed almost immediately by the absolute blackness that stretched before him. This wasn't just a physical descent. It was a plunge into the very core of his deepest fears, a journey into the twisted heart of the collective nightmare. The passage narrowed, pressing in on him, the smooth, dark stone walls almost touching his shoulders, creating an unbearable sense of claustrophobia. He could feel the cold radiating from every surface, seeping into his bones, a profound chill that promised to freeze his very soul. The melody intensified, becoming louder, clearer, now accompanied by a faint, rhythmic scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across stone, a sound that seemed to synchronize with the beat of his frantic heart. He tried to rationalize, to dismiss it as an auditory hallucination, a product of his unraveling mind, but the sound was too real, too tangible, resonating in the very air around him. The whispers returned, not from the main labyrinth walls, but from directly within the passage, a chorus of despair that spoke of his inevitable doom. He waits. The dreamer cannot escape. A chorus of distorted voices moaned, their words slithering into his mind, poisoning his thoughts with dread and resignation. The entity, he realized, was not just observing. It was actively pulling him in, luring him with the promise of answers, trapping him deeper within its elaborate prison. As he moved deeper, the passage began to undulate subtly, the stone walls seeming to flex and contract around him, a grotesque mimicry of living tissue. The floor beneath his feet became slick, coated in a viscous cold film that squelched with each step, smelling faintly of stagnant water and something organic and decaying. He stumbled, his hand instinctively reaching out to steady himself, his fingers brushing against something soft and yielding on the wall. He recoiled instantly, a wave of nausea washing over him. The substance was cold, clammy, and clung to his skin, leaving behind a profound sense of defilement. He shone his flashlight on it, his breath hitched. It was a dark, glistening residue, like dried blood mixed with something fibrous, organic, yet utterly alien. It was the very essence of the maze, a living, breathing entity, its walls lined with a grotesque byproduct of its existence. The lullaby melody now seemed to emanate directly from the substance, its warped notes dripping into the air, a sickening soundtrack to his descent into madness. He pressed onward, driven by the maddening melody and the insistent whispers, his mind a battlefield of fear and a desperate compulsion to understand. He recalled the Archivist's most cryptic post: "The center is cold, the heart still beats, but it feeds on warmth." Alex felt a chilling premonition. The entity was a parasite, drawing energy from the terror and despair of those trapped within its dream, and he was being led directly to its feeding ground. The air grew impossibly heavy, pressing in on his chest, making each breath a conscious effort. The shadows writhed around him, no longer just passive absence of light, but active, malevolent entities, darting at the periphery of his vision, coalescing into fleeting, grotesque shapes before dissolving back into the gloom. He knew they were the extensions of the main entity, its eyes, its hands, reaching out, guiding him, testing him. The metallic tang of blood was now so strong, he could taste it, acrid and coppery, on his tongue, a constant reminder of the unseen horrors that permeated this living prison. He stumbled into a vast, cavernous chamber, the walls still made of the dark, featureless stone, but here the space was immense, echoing. The lullaby melody, now deafening, filled the chamber, resonating from every surface, vibrating in his very bones. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by a faint, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from within the stone itself, stood a colossal structure. It was a switchboard, but unlike any he had ever seen. It was organic, grotesque, its wires, thick, pulsing veins, its connections, masses of glistening, organic tissue. From it, hundreds, perhaps thousands, of thin, silvery tendrils snaked out, disappearing into the darkness, undoubtedly connecting to the countless victims trapped in the collective dream. The metallic scent was overpowering here, mixed with the sickly sweet odor of decay, and something else, something profoundly unnatural, like burning consciousness. This was the heart of the labyrinth, the nexus of the shared nightmare. And there, standing before the grotesque switchboard, was the entity. It was taller, grander, more defined than the silhouette he had glimpsed before. Its form was an absolute void, a shimmering absence of light, absorbing every photon that dared to approach. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle, and from its featureless face, 2 pinpricks of burning red light. Its eyes fixed directly on him, pulsed with a cold, ancient hunger. It was surrounded by faint, translucent figures, ethereal forms of men, women, and children, their faces contorted in silent screams, their hands outstretched, trapped, absorbed into the pulsing tendrils of the organic switchboard. They were the victims, the thousands from the meme, forever bound to the entity, their despair feeding its endless existence. He saw Mr. Evans from his own building, a translucent form near the base of the switchboard, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored Alex's own, a chilling confirmation of a connection he had tried to deny. The entity was not merely a dream, it was a parasitic god, feeding on the collective unconscious, growing stronger with every shared nightmare. The entity raised a long, shadowy limb, not towards him, but towards the organic switchboard, and the lullaby melody intensified, becoming a piercing shriek of static and warped music. The tendrils connected to the victims pulsed violently, and the spectral figures contorted in agony, their silent screams palpable in the frigid air. It was a demonstration of its power, a chilling warning. The whispers in Alex's mind returned, now clearer, more insidious. Join us. Feel the warmth. It never ends. They were the voices of the trapped, no longer warning him, but inviting him into their shared torment, warped by the entity's influence. He felt a powerful, almost irresistible pull towards the grotesque switchboard, a magnetic force drawing him into its web. His own memories began to flicker at the periphery of his vision, fragmented images of Sam, of Dr. Sharma, of his dorm room, blurring with the horrifying reality of the maze. The entity was reaching into his mind, preying on his sanity, preparing him for assimilation. He stumbled backwards, a desperate, guttural cry escaping his lips, his will battling against the overwhelming compulsion. He knew what awaited him at the switchboard, an eternity of torment, feeding the entity's insatiable hunger. He had to resist. He had to find the key, the melody that unlocks, that the Archivist had spoken of. He needed to break the loop, to free himself and, perhaps, the others. He looked frantically around the vast chamber, his gaze darting across the oppressive stone walls, desperate for any anomaly, any hidden sign. The metallic tang of blood was suffocating, and the cold was unbearable, burning his skin. The entity remained motionless, its burning red eyes fixed on him, its silent presence a crushing weight, patiently waiting for him to succumb, to become another phantom on its grotesque feed. His mind raced, pulling at the threads of the Archivist's cryptic clues, trying to find a pattern, a meaning, a way to fight back against this impossible god of nightmares. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a single, tiny detail on the dark stone wall of the chamber, almost imperceptible against the vast expanse. It was a faint, almost invisible scratch mark, barely a millimeter long, but distinct. Not a natural fissure, but a deliberate inscription. It was the same spiral symbol the Archivist had posted, with the single unbroken line leading to its center. It was the key, a hidden map within the maze itself, a counter melody to the entity's warped lullaby. He instinctively reached out, his finger tracing the delicate spiral, a desperate hope igniting within him. As his fingertip brushed against the symbol, a low, resonant thrum emanated from the stone. Not the oppressive hum of the entity, but a clear, pure tone. A harmonic that seemed to resonate with his own will. The lullaby melody from the switchboard wavered, a flicker of distortion in its relentless rhythm. The entity's eyes widened, a subtle shift in its predatory gaze, as if it sensed his discovery, his defiance. He had found a way to fight back, a single thread of resistance in a tapestry of despair. And as the pure tone resonated, a faint, almost imperceptible line of light began to glow on the floor, outlining a circular path around the monstrous switchboard, a perfect, unbroken circle in the heart of the infinite maze. The faint, almost imperceptible line of light began to glow on the floor, outlining a perfect, unbroken circular path around the monstrous organic switchboard in the heart of the labyrinth. It pulsed with a pure, steady luminescence, a stark contrast to the sickly, malevolent glow of the entity's tendrils. The warped lullaby emanating from the switchboard wavered, its piercing shriek momentarily replaced by a discordant cacophony of static and broken notes, as if the entity itself were struggling. Its harmony disrupted, Alex stared at the glowing circle, a desperate hope surging through him. This was the Archivist's key, the melody that unlocks a true path within the impossible structure. The cold, ancient hunger in the entity's burning red eyes intensified, fixed on him, its shadowy form rippling with what seemed to be a silent, ancient fury. It had been challenged. Its control, for the first time, was not absolute. The metallic tang of blood and the cloying sweetness of decay suddenly diminished, replaced by a fleeting scent of fresh ozone, the smell of a circuit finally breaking free. Driven by a surge of defiant adrenaline, Alex stepped onto the glowing circular path. As his feet touched the light, a powerful, resonant hum vibrated through the floor, a pure, harmonious tone that seemed to counter the entity's distorted lullaby, momentarily silencing the whispers of the trapped. He began to walk, following the circular path, his steps purposeful. The entity watched, its form darkening, its presence growing heavier, almost solidifying into a physical wall of despair that threatened to block his way. The spectral figures of the victims, previously absorbed into the switchboard, flickered violently, their forms momentarily regaining definition, their faces contorted in expressions of terror and fleeting hope. They were caught between two forces, the entity's ancient grasp and the new resonant frequency Alex had activated. He could hear their silent screams, a desperate chorus of trapped souls yearning for release, their agony amplified by the struggle for their collective consciousness. With each step, Alex took along the glowing circle. The pure, resonant hum intensified, creating a barrier of sound and energy that seemed to repel the entity's oppressive cold. The parasitic tendrils connected to the organic switchboard writhed and retracted, recoiling from the light, their sickly glow diminishing. The warped lullaby weakened, becoming faint, distant, struggling to assert its dominion. The entity let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that seemed to vibrate the very air, a monstrous purr of rage and frustration. It lunged forward, a silent blur of shadow, but as it reached the edge of the glowing circle, it recoiled violently, its form momentarily dissolving into a burst of static and darkness. Unable to breach the pure energy of the pathway, it reformed quickly, its burning red eyes fixed on him, its silent wrath a palpable force. It was trying to reassert control, to extinguish the light, to trap him back in the endless cycle of despair. The spectral figures on the switchboard pulsed erratically, caught in the conflict, their forms flickering between solidity and transparency. Alex continued to walk, his gaze fixed on the glowing path, maintaining the resonant hum. He remembered the Archivist's final, most cryptic message: the true exit is not found outside, but within the echo, a silence that screams. He realized now, the key wasn't just to navigate the maze, it was to disrupt the entity's connection, to break the loop of the shared nightmare. The echo was the collective suffering, the trapped consciousness. The silence that screams was the absence of the entity's controlling hum, the moment when its power was broken. He had to complete the circle, to amplify the pure tone, to sever the parasitic connections. The entity, unable to breach the circle, began to exert its influence directly on his mind, flooding him with fragmented memories, distorted images of his loved ones, of his greatest fears. He saw Chloe's terrified face, Lily's ghostly smile, Professor Wallace's dismissive frown. It was trying to break his resolve, to plunge him back into the personal torment of his own past. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the unwavering light, on the pure hum, on the desperate hope of freedom. The chamber began to tremble, the dark stone walls shaking violently, dust raining down from the impossibly high ceiling. Cracks, thin and jagged, spread across the smooth surfaces, illuminated by the pulsing circular light. The entire labyrinth, a massive, living prison, was reacting to the disruption, its very foundations threatening to shatter. The spectral figures on the switchboard began to move, no longer just flickering, but reaching out towards him, their translucent hands pleading, some with hope, others with anguish, caught in the tearing fabric of their reality. Their silent screams were almost audible, a cacophony of despair that echoed in his mind, mingling with the entity's frustrated growls. He felt a profound sense of responsibility. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for them, for the thousands of lost souls trapped within this digital nightmare. The entity, now a swirling vortex of absolute darkness, launched projectiles of pure shadow at him, jagged fragments of emptiness that dissipated harmlessly against the glowing barrier of the circle, its rage palpable, its ancient hunger denied. He was nearing the completion of the circle, the glowing light on the floor converging, ready to seal the path. The entity let out a final ear-splitting shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury and agony, as its tendrils shriveled and retracted from the switchboard, tearing away from the spectral figures with a sickening, ripping sound. The warped lullaby died, replaced by a profound, echoing silence, deeper and more unsettling than any he had experienced before. It was the silence that screams, the sound of its power being broken. The spectral figures on the switchboard, now released, shimmered violently, their forms stretching and distorting. Then slowly, gracefully, they began to fade, dissolving into motes of pure light that drifted upwards, absorbed by the distant twilight ceiling of the chamber. They were free. Their torment was over. A wave of profound relief washed over Alex, mixed with a chilling sense of accomplishment. He had done it. He had broken the loop. As he completed the circle, the glowing light on the floor intensified to a blinding white, then contracted, imploding inward with a silent, powerful force. The massive, organic switchboard in the center of the chamber shriveled, its pulsating veins withering, its glistening tissue turning to dust. The metallic tang and the scent of decay vanished, replaced by a clean, crisp aroma of ozone, and fresh air. The chamber was plunged into profound darkness, colder than ever before, but it was an empty cold, a vast absence of the malevolent presence. The entity was gone. Its grip on the collective unconscious was broken. Alex stood alone in the absolute darkness, his heart pounding, his body trembling, but with a profound sense of victory. He had faced the nightmare, navigated its impossible pathways, and severed its connection. He reached for his phone, its screen still glowing faintly, eager to see if the forum was buzzing with news of the maze's collapse, if the thousands of others were finally free. He found the forum, but the thread for the maze dream was gone. All mentions of the meme had vanished. It was as if it had never existed, wiped clean from the digital landscape. A chill of dread ran down his spine. Had he truly won, or had he simply erased the evidence, trapping himself as the sole bearer of this terrifying knowledge? He tried to search for the Archivist, but his profile, his posts, his very existence on the forum had been purged. It was a terrifying silence, an absence that spoke volumes. He was truly alone with his memories, with the labyrinth forever etched into his mind. He looked around the profound darkness of the chamber, now truly empty. The cold was still there, a lingering residue, a silent promise. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that while he had broken the entity's grip on the collective, he had become its new archive, its sole host. The maze might be gone from the internet, but it now resided within him, an internal prison. He closed his eyes, then opened them again, expecting to wake in his dorm room. He did. The familiar scent of instant coffee and old textbooks filled his nostrils. The gentle hum of his laptop, charging quietly beside his bed, was a comforting sound of normalcy. He sat up, his body aching, his mind reeling from the vividness of the nightmare. It had all been a dream, a collective hallucination. He grabbed his phone, scrolling to the internet mystery forum. The thread for The Maze Dream was back, and it was exploding with new posts. Did anyone else feel a jolt, like a power surge? The maze felt different last night, weaker. I saw a light, a circle. Alex stared at the screen, a profound, chilling realization washing over him. The maze wasn't gone. It had merely been reset. He had weakened it, yes, but its cycle continued. And then as he scrolled, he saw a new post near the top of the thread from the Archivist. The heart has been touched. The echo remains. The silence still screams. It waits and it watches. And from the far corner of his seemingly normal dorm room, where his laptop sat, a faint, rhythmic melody, like a warped lullaby played on distant broken music boxes, began to drift, barely audible, a chilling reminder that the maze had found its way out and into his waking world forever. And with that, their story came to an end. But it leaves one last question for you. If a nightmare you desperately tried to escape started playing its melody in your waking life, where would you hide from sleep? Share your most chilling sleep stories in the comments below. See you in the next one.